All right, everyone, welcome back. Let's in this video here, let's take a look at this video. This particular video is going to be a final review of the Module 1, which was the communication process and culture. Now, as you recall, in Module 1, we talked about this thing called the communication process, how it begins, how it proceeds through, how it ends, and how kind of things return back. And we'll talk more in greater detail. We also talked about barriers, and in particular we spent some time on one of the barriers which we call culture. Now, culture is important in the business community because as a world economy for the most part nowadays, we get to deal with people of various cultures all over the world. Now, we need to be able to understand what makes them, so to speak, tick, so we can actually effectively communicate with them. So let's go ahead and proceed with the communication process and move right along. Now, the communication process always starts with a sender, an initiator of the message. In this case, all right, it could be me, no beard, but that's fine. So we have me, and what am I doing? I'm thinking, oh, I'm sorry, and then there's you at the very end. Now, what am I? I'm thinking about some great thoughts that I want to about the message, the meaning of the message that I want to send to you. Now, I come up with these great thoughts, and then I'm also organizing these great thoughts. The reason why I'm organizing them is because they have to be sent to you in a logical approach, very structured approach, because, well, that's how we think, logically and in order. So, after I've done this thinking and organizing, I'm now encoding the message. The encoding of the message is making meaning or putting the message in meaning that I think you will understand. It is the use of carefully, shall we say, selected words, carefully selected words that provide meaning to be understood. It also, because of the message and the content of the message, it is at this point that I'm determining the next step, which is the communication channel, or the way the message is getting to you. Now, is that what, face-to-face? Is it a telephone call? Is it an email? Is it a letter, a memo, smoke signals, carrier pigeon? Whatever it is. But I need to be able to find the best one based on the type of the message and the urgency of the message. The next step is the decoding. And this is at the point where you receive the message. Now, what are you doing at this point? You are, thinking about the message, thinking about the meaning, thinking about the words, putting them into a meaning that you understand, and hopefully that I wanted you to understand. You are then putting them into some organized level so you can go through them in your mind, in your brain, and make, shall we say, a micro meaning and then an overall macro meaning. Again, the decoding is the translating of the message into meaning. Now, this does not, as we know, end the process. This is only like halfway through. What I need to do as a sender is that you received it, and hopefully you understand the message and the meaning of the message as I wanted you to. So what we do is we put in the feedback phase. Now, the feedback phase is what you as the receiver of the message is going to do. You're going to provide me with some idea that the message was first received and that it was understood. Now, there's some things that can occur. You're going to, where feedback may not necessarily, the lack of feedback may not necessarily mean no feedback, but could be feedback. Now, generally, the types of feedback you'll get are, yes, got the message, everything's good. Or if I initiated in my initial message said, only contact me if you have questions, and if you don't, that tells me the message was received. Now, there could be other reasons why. Maybe you're just upset and you don't want to respond back. That tells me something's wrong. That is actually a message, and I need to go back now and find out why I'm not getting anything back from you. So, again, the feedback is very important at this point in time. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't always work nice and neat. There are what we call barriers to communication. Now, barriers can be physical and otherwise. Now, barriers can also occur at any point during the process or at multiple points during the process. Barriers can be in my thinking process, they can be in my organizing process, they could be in the way I'm encoding the message or selection of the channel that I wanted. It could be in your decode. Maybe you're not interpreting it properly and or your organization of the interpretation is not correct. And finally, it's the feedback. There could be a barrier in the feedback. Now, there could be any number of reasons for these. There's also one which we really didn't talk about, but it could be the improper use of the message for the environment. And this one is what I'm calling about the context. Now, if it's a very formal message, you would usually make the context, the environment very formal. But if I made it during an informal gathering, something very formal, it probably would not work very well. So we need to keep these things in mind. Let's talk a little bit more about these barriers. Now, there are several of them. First of all are the physical barriers. And these are probably the ones you have the greatest control over. Physical barriers can be walls, could be doors, it could be distance, it could be anything that you can touch, taste, see, smell, and hear that could interfere with the process of communication. Now, we can overcome these barriers, certainly. Example, a physical barrier, doors closed, well, you open the door. And or you're too far away, you move closer. So those physical barriers are the ones that are easily fixable, lack of a better term. Next is emotional, which is internal. Emotional can be in both the sender and the receiver. So that's something we have to be aware of. Emotion distorts the meaning of the message, can distort the meaning of the message. It could be the sender using too much emotion, which distorts the actual meaning, where the receiver gets it and doesn't quite understand. Or it could be the other way around. The receiver has an emotional inference that does not want to interpret the message correctly. Perceptual. Generally, perceptual is what you think. Generally, the receiver thinks about the message, about the source of the message, about the environment, either positive or negative. And again, that can be an interference or barrier in the process. Gender. We talked to some degree about gender. Yes, there are still gender barriers. I don't think it's so much the concern about the glass ceiling and whatnot. I think it's just the way males and females are, quote, hardwired genetically, that we need to be aware of. Issues such as sensitivity and being pushy and so on and so on. Not to say that they cannot be overcome, but we need to be available or more aware and available to modify our communication process. Language again. Since we are a multicultural society, there's many languages. Business deals with many cultures, with people who speak many languages. Now, it doesn't mean you have to run out and learn a bunch of languages, but you certainly need to be aware that there are the differences, and it may take time for interpretation based on language. You also need to be very straightforward with the use of a language for someone who is not familiar with it. Slang, for example, is something we do not include because that can have many connotations which an individual just won't understand. Interpersonal. Interpersonal is your internal, how do you feel about yourself? How do you see the world? And so on. So, that certainly can be a barrier. Now, you as a sender may have an understanding of someone's interpersonal feelings or stance. But you need to be aware that there could be issues. So if in the feedback phase you kind of perceive something's up, at least you have an idea. Remember the process. If you're lucky, it'll go around once. But sometimes you may have to go around 2, 3, 4 times because the message didn't quite hit the way you wanted it to. So these barriers need to be thought about too. Finally, culture. We talked a lot about culture. We got the high and the low context cultures. Culture makes up the people of the world. Again, there's not a whole bunch we can do about that. At least from a center point of view. I cannot modify your culture, but I can be able to understand your culture. So let's talk just briefly about culture here. Culture is that which makes you who you are. It is the creation, the development of your likes and your dislikes, your opinions, thoughts you have on all subjects, actions you may do, and beliefs you may have. Generally, these were formulated when you were very young in your family unit. But as we talked about, they modify, and you can have multiple culture situations or environments if you wish as you grow up because of the people you and groups you associate with. You bring along what you like and you create new beliefs and thoughts. So it's evolving. Now, the characteristics, again, it could be genetics. Yes, culture, there are definite cultural genetics. It could be looks, it could be the way you appear, dress, your voice, certainly language might be part of that. Because that's part of the environments about the, where you live. Like, again, high context cultures, for example, are generally individuals who come from South America, Middle Eastern countries, and Asian countries. Low context, on the other hand, are individuals who might come from the United States, Canada, and possibly Great Britain. Now, if you just think about the people who come from those areas, you can see physical differences which are dictated by genetics. So those are characteristics that we can help us with the culture, understand the culture. Culture, again, is learned and assimilated. You learn it, you like it generally, and you move on. It is changeable, but it is your choice. I cannot, as the initiator of the message, change your opinions. You are the only one who can change your opinion. Anyways, that's about it. There might be a couple final thoughts here. Let's take a look. The communication process, again, it's imperfect, but it has to be performed to have the business world work. It may take many times for the process, for one message, one meaning to occur, but it needs to be done. The less often you have to do it, the better off you are as far as the number of processes. Barriers are always there. They always will be there. Be aware of them. See if you can identify them, anticipate them, but you need to be available or be able to work with them. And then finally, culture. Culture, again, is the heart of who we are, and we need to be aware of all the differences so we can work and be successful accordingly. That's it.